meeting of the Metropolitan Council for October 8th, 2025. Our first action tonight is to have our Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement. I'm going to turn it to Councilmember Pacheco this evening.
Madam Chair, members of the meeting to this evening, it's my pleasure to read the Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement. The Metropolitan Council acknowledges that the land we currently call Minnesota, and specifically the 7-county region, is the ancestral home of the Dakota Oyate, who are present and active contributors to our thriving region. As part of the Metropolitan Council's commitment to address the unresolved legacy of genocide, dispossession, and settler colonialism, and the fact that government institutions, including the Metropolitan Council, benefited economically, politically, and institutionally after the forcible removal of the Dakota Oyate. The Metropolitan Council is dedicated to instilling land, water, and people commitments in regional policy. These commitments support the Dakota Oyate, the 11 federally recognized tribes in Minnesota, Ho-Chunk Nation, and the American Indian communities representing 150 diverse tribal nations that call the 7-county region home.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. We're on now to approval of the agenda. If there are no objections, we can proceed. Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the September 24th council meeting minutes. If there are no changes or additions, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Osman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Pacheco. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the minutes are adopted. Next, we have public invitation. Interested persons may address the council on matters that are not in the agenda. And I don't believe we have any signups, but I would extend it to the audience if there's anyone. All right, seeing none, moving on to the consent agenda. We have 6 items on consent tonight. I'd entertain a motion to approve the items on consent.
Motion to approve?
Moved by Councilmember Chambliss. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Tony Carter. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the consent items are adopted. Moving on to non-consent business this evening, we have no reports on community development, environment, or management, but we do have one for transportation. Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Chair. Council members, business item number 2025-229 requests the council to accept the public comment report and adopt amendment number 1 to the transportation policy plan, changing the Blue Line Extension Transitway alignment and funding and adding Gold Line Extension Transitway to the fiscally constrained plan. The transportation policy plan identifies regionally significant transportation investments that will be implemented within its timeline and maintains a fiscal balance between anticipated project costs and funding. The TPP also describes the region's transitway advancement policy. Transitway projects are defined as regionally significant in the plan. Any amendment changing or adding a transitway project in the fiscally constrained plan must meet the region's transitway advancement policy requirements and complete a 45-day public comment period. These requirements have been met for the Blue Line Extension and Gold Line Extension projects. Accepting the public comment report and adopting the proposed amendment would incorporate these changes into the TPP's fiscally constrained plan. Therefore, Madam Chair, I move that the council accept the public comment report and adopt amendment number 1 to the transportation policy plan, changing the Blue Line Extension Transitway alignment and funding and adding the Gold Line Extension Transitway to the fiscally constrained plan.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Osman. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and that motion is adopted. That is our final business item for tonight. We actually have 3 rather busy information items this evening. The first is Imagine 2050 Outcomes Measurement Program updates regarding regional policies. And we have Kristen Redmond-Turres and Sarah Nelson here. Welcome.
Thank you. Don't want to get too ahead of our slides. Thank you so much for having us back today to continue the conversation about this work. I'm Kristen Rybaturez. I'm a research manager in community development, and Sarah Nelson is our senior outcomes measurement researcher. So we have prepared for you today. We have about 40 minutes for this item, and we've come with options today. We have our amendment narrative, which we're sharing for the first time. It's a 4-page document that's linked in the agenda materials for today's meeting. And it summarizes a lot of the conversations we've had with you and at the committee level recently about our outcomes-focused approach, about looking at many data points in a programmatic way, about how we're building on past efforts and improving them. So a lot of that should be familiar at this point, but we've also prepared a few slides that highlight our commitments, principles, and some other information about the amendment for you all to consider and for us to have a brief discussion about. The options come on how we focus the rest of our time together. So we are here, and our slides certainly indicate that we're ready to pick up the conversation on regional goal measures that we were unable to have in early September. We may not get through all of them, though. Just 5 is a lot, so I just want to put that out there. So we are thinking maybe 3 measures that we'll have time for today. We would also be willing to discuss any of the policy measures that we've presented at the committee level. Those are available on the program website, so we can pull them up and have a conversation on any of those items if you'd prefer. Really, we have this time together. We also have, we're on next week's Committee of the Whole agenda, and we're really looking to have whatever conversation you all feel is needed to make sure we're comfortable moving the amendment forward on October 22nd. So I suppose with that information, I would just ask maybe for confirmation on how we'd like to proceed today. If we'd like to focus on proposed measures for regional goals, or if there's some other part of the program that would be better spent discussing this afternoon. Madam Chair, what would you all, how would you like to proceed with today's conversation? Regional goal measures or policy measures?
Anyone have preferences? Councilmember Chambliss.
Can we talk about both?
Yeah, we can combo, yes, yes, yeah.
All right, any other comments? Okay,
Okay,
go ahead.
good. Okay. So this is a very familiar slide at this point, except that the column there on the left is, you know, we're moving through these meetings that we've had scheduled. The information item linked in today's agenda material summarizes the conversations that we've had at Community Development Committee and Environment Committee last month. Also the brief conversation that we had at the beginning of September. And as I said, in 2 weeks' time, we'll be asking for your authorization to approve the amendment for the Imagine 2050 Outcomes Measurement Program, which consists of these 2 pieces. Part A, which you are seeing today for the first time, but we've discussed quite a bit, as I mentioned. And then Part B, which is the technical appendix, which we've not compiled completely yet, waiting to make any additional revisions or changes we need to, but all of the pieces are available on the program website at this point. And just a reminder that this does not supplant the adopted measures for the transportation policy plan that were adopted. The regional and federal measures were adopted with a chapter of that plan with Imagine 2050. So there will be measures they recommend for the program, but it is not, it'll be part of the amendment, but it is not in replacement of measures they've already adopted. I'm going to hand it to you, Sarah, to talk a little bit about the amendment program narrative. Thank you.
Yeah, so now we'll focus on Part A of the amendment. That's that narrative piece. So this new content will live in the front section, the vision, values, and goals chapter of Imagine 2050. It will be a new section towards the end of that chapter, so a section 8. Immediately following the sections that describe the regional goals. So the chapter will describe the goals, and then it will describe how we plan to measure progress and the outcomes. Like Kristen said, the second part of the amendment will be detailed in Technical Appendix C, and those will be the actual measures themselves. So this slide describes the program's commitments, and these are included in the draft amendment language as well. They're really about establishing and documenting the opportunity to build dialogues. This program isn't just an exercise in collecting data. It's about how we at the council and residents of the region use it. We also wanted to be very clear that there can be tension as our region changes and develops, and we will see some of those tension points reflected in this program. This program isn't meant to resolve those tensions or those trade-offs and balances, but it is meant to facilitate respectful dialogues about those. The amendment includes commitments on a couple different levels. So within the Met Council, we are committing to the cross-divisional support that this program requires. But we're also committing to our partners and the residents of the region that we will be more transparent and that we will follow through with that core value of accountability. This slide outlines the program's 3 guiding principles. These are also described in the amendment. The full drafted narrative is 4 pages long, and it really just documents some of the discussions that we've already had, as Kristen mentioned. The need to be iterative as data sources, methods, or processes change, really baking in that idea of continuous improvement, making sure that the program is adaptable and responsive to the feedback and engagement that we have moving forward, and also just ensuring that the program is meaningful for us and for stakeholders, that it really tells us something about what's happening in the region.
Okay, so that's a little bit about our narrative. Obviously, there's more in the document that you have linked, but I think we just want to pause there since this is not measure focused and just see if there are any additional questions about the information we shared either here in slides or that you just have in general about the program narrative.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Chambliss?
I just want to say I think that the Met Council commitments are really important, and I'm glad that we have an opportunity to evaluate all of the program commitments.
Thank you.
Additional comments? I appreciate the narrative part being up front and then more details and information in the back. I think that's really helpful because different people process information differently. And so it's a good way for different audiences to get the information. So, all right, anything else? Councilmember Carter?
And I just really wanted to appreciate the principles that have been put forth and note that although we are setting forth the program with the intent of it having meaning for the full period and being able to measure and track our results, we are also sharing that it is a developing process. And I think that the narrative makes that clear. We want to learn as we go. And as much as we're pointing a direction, we know where we want to be, we just don't know exactly what we're going to learn in the process about how we're getting there. So thank you for the clarity in that regard with something that is kind of hard to be clear about. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Anything else? Councilmember Chambliss?
Thank you, Chair. I also wanted to mention that I appreciate the focus that we have, not just on the activities, but on the outcomes based on our values and our goals, and that it allows for measurement of those outcomes. I think that's a critical point, and that also requires the follow-up and the data collection and the data disaggregation that is mentioned. So that's also a good thing.
All right, back to you guys.
Okay, moving on. Thank you. So since we were last here on September 3rd, a couple of things have happened. So the measures that you will be looking at will differ slightly from that mega spreadsheet that we shared with you on September 3rd, hopefully in positive ways. But there have been some additions, a couple of removals as well. We've worked with staff to identify some of the small research projects that are needed to kind of get the measures operationalized and like off the ground. So some of those do require some additional data work or, just making some decisions on methodology. And we've also made some refinements to our climate and natural systems measures primarily. We did get a lot of feedback from the staff experts involved in that work, and they made great recommendations on how to clarify things, where we could find some additional sources, and so forth. So there are some slight changes that you will notice if you very closely studied all 100+ measures we shared with you last month. The availability of federal data sources continues to be dynamic. So we are continuing to track what may no longer be available and what some alternatives might look like for those sources. One example that you may have seen, headlined in news lately is around the food insecurity measure. There is a survey that the Census Bureau sends out to really have that, and it is one of the key sources of information for that work. And I'm not sure if it's been officially decided, but it's proposed to no longer continue. So those are the types of things we need to keep looking at and stay on top of, because we are in a moment where that is required. And then additional feedback from our community development and environment committees, as well as some advisory and external input has been offered, and that has helped us refine some of the policy measures. So we might not get to those today, but just wanted to, if you notice changes, it is because we are evolving things as we move forward. And we are trying to be transparent in that we are time stamping kind of when things are being refreshed, just so to communicate that. So the general format of these is that we have slides that kind of recap the regional goal topic, maybe provide some definitions, and then in this particular case, describing something specific about the policy related to the goals. And then we do have available one-page documents that are available on the program website of the measures. So I would invite council members, if you would like, to pull that program webpage up just so that we can have that information available. The web address is metrocouncil.org/imagine2050outcomes. So that material is available. It's also, like I said, very similar to the information that was shared last month. So I'm going to cover 3 of these, touch on 3 of the goals to move through that quickly, and then we can pause to have discussion. If we get to the other 2, we do. If we don't, we'll see you again next week. So just to take on our first regional goal, our region is equitable and inclusive. As Sarah described in our commitments, or as you could read about in our commitments, all of the proposed measures are reviewed for potential spatial or population group disaggregation. So the slate of measures here may look a little light when we look at that document, but it is because we are really building in ways to look at equity and inclusion throughout this program. So we are tracking it across the data points and across the program as a standard practice. Also, the implementation of the equity frameworks, which are listed there on the slide, that will generate additional Met Council measures, and that work is going to take place next year, so that we don't have those measures to incorporate in the program, but those will be coming. So just wanted to make those couple of points about equitable and inclusive proposed measures. Next regional goal, our communities are healthy and safe. As an operator of the region's wastewater system and the primary provider of public transit, Met Council has an established role in health and safety for decades. In Imagine 2050, this role was expanded to really think about social determinants of health, environmental justice, and how the design of the built environment affects individual and social health. And that is reflected in the measures that you will see related to this goal. We wanted to make this point that I think is made in the chapter repeatedly, that there are inequities in health and safety outcomes. That is clear. And all population groups could stand to improve where their measures are right now. And the authors of that chapter wanted me to make that point to just emphasize that the importance of disaggregation, but also the recognition that improvement is available for all groups, that we really are seeing some troubling trends in some categories here. And then our third goal that we'll cover now is our region is dynamic and resilient. In our previous regional development guide, Thrive MSP 2040, the focus was on economic competitiveness, on infrastructure and investments, specifically transit expansion, and the relative affordability. And I know our friends from Greater MSP might be here soon to talk about other aspects of that. So we welcome them and their perspective on those things. In Imagine 2050, we see, again, sort of an expanded scope or vision of what dynamic and resilient region might look like. A focus on economic mobility and wealth creation, thinking about entrepreneurs and small businesses, and how climate resiliency and energy independence really fits into that equation. So just trying to call back to some specific topics described in that chapter. We're also, of course, aligning and thinking about the measures that are highlighted in the upcoming Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy document, which is coming your way soon as well, and making sure that we were in close alignment with that group as they develop that document, and including relevant proposed measures here. So I'm going to pause, and I would invite council members to, if they want to use the interactive visualization available on that webpage, to look at measures related to equitable and inclusive, healthy and safe, or dynamic and resilient. There are also these one-page documents that are available that I think might be a little more legible for today's conversation, but I leave that to all of you. And with that, I think we can pause here to take some questions or comments about any of the proposed measures for these three goals. And we recognize there's a lot of information here, and we are happy to answer questions following the meeting and share information that way too. But with that, I will turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Regional Administrator.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I appreciate the interactive tool. It's a good way to look at it too. My question is just, as you work with partners across the region, right? So other jurisdictions do similar work around performance indicators, trying to figure out best data sets. I've gone through similar exercises with different entities in the past. How does the dialogue work with other, as you're out for system statements and in conversation? I'm just curious how we use, this is a great set of measures, frankly. And I'm just wondering, how do we help other jurisdictions who are trying to figure out how to best measure, using some of these proxy measures, what's happening in their communities? How does that dialogue work just going forward here as the plan rolls out?
Starting with an easy question, thank you.
Just wanted to challenge you.
I think as we build the dashboard that contains the information, and we start with that engagement, and we're going out to communities and talking with them, sharing the information. Does this resonate with you? Does it not? I think that technical assistance sort of piece that you're referencing will sort of occur in that space of engaging with them, showing the program, making sure they're aware of the information that we collect. I think it might also take place in small parts sooner as we think about some of the data projects that we need to facilitate new data collection. We'll be working with those communities to say, hey, we'd like to invite you to take a survey where you can tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing that doesn't necessarily land in your comp plan. It might not. We would like to know more about what that work looks like on the ground, and we'll be, kind of co-creating what that survey process looks like with them to make sure that we're not burdening them by asking too many questions, but also making sure that we're capturing what the work on the ground really looks like. So I think even through that process, we might see some opportunities to help and support that. And of course, we're available. If we're contacted, we'd be happy to talk with folks about that. We see a lot of great programs across the region that do measurement and indicator work. We've looked at all of them to see, as part of our resourcing for data sets. So not only we hope to share this process, and we hope to learn from them as well in those dialogues. I'm not sure we have total assurance about everything it looks like.
Go ahead, all right.
Thanks. That's a good answer, and it's okay not to have the perfect answer. I was in a spot 10 years ago trying to do some of this dashboard work, and so this one lands strong, and Councilmember Carter was sitting at the table during that process, and part of the biggest challenge is finding good data, finding data that's consistent with other entities in your region, and then figuring out which ones to use. And the last part is it's almost impossible. They're all good measures, and so you kind of have to pick what you choose to be your proxy measures and go forward. And I'm partly reminded of this to anchor to an upcoming presentation when Greater MSP is coming and sharing their performance dashboard here as well. That's also 10 years old. And that was one of the other things. It is striking to me how advanced this has gotten over the past decade to allow for such a stronger, better way of understanding ourselves, both through this data and through what will be presented then, that I'm just kind of curious how we help guide communities there who may not fully be aware. And we'll think about it through these communities of the whole in communities. We'll think about it through the processes you cited. There's just an opportunity to be an asset to the region as they want to get more engaged in this work. And I appreciate you sharing thoughts.
And I'm going to follow on to that just a little bit. As council members, as system statements and things have gone out, spend a lot more time out in communities. So one of the great things we can have with these tools is you can show them these tools in real time. And sometimes it's the understanding of what the why is. We have our Met Council measure, but these regional measures really, if you click on each of them, it gives you a variety of things of, well, why does that matter to my community? And you go out to these measures and say, these are the things we're measuring. And so you can tie it into a narrative as you go back. We've got first Councilmember Jenkins and then Councilmember Pacheco and Carter.
So along those lines, what are some of the things we're doing to accommodate the difference between a St. Paul and a Nininger Township, for example? Some of the data will be very, maybe even critical to St. Paul, but not as much to Nininger. And yet we still want to make sure Nininger and Randolph and all the townships are also participating in this project. How are we accommodating those differences?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilmember. I think, one example, well, certainly we've come across this when it comes to census tracts, and just they get bigger, they get fewer as we move out from into the less populated parts of the region. So we've been smoothing out kind of methodological challenges like that for quite a while. I think one example is that I can think of a couple measures that actually use kind of a staged or like a tiered approach to whether or not a measure is being met. So for example, in a denser urban area, the expectation of open space compared to population, right, that will change. That ratio will and should change as you move outwards into like the urban edge areas of or the suburban edge areas of the region. And so that would be one way that we could account for just different development footprints, different expectations really around what an outcome looks like successfully across, a region that has diverse communities. I could potentially think of another example or two, but I hope that, kind of speaks to your question. It is not always one size fits all. That's why the spatial disaggregation element is important and the context is important. I'm never in favor of just publishing a chart or a graph that doesn't kind of unpack some of that variability within it, and making sure that the narrative that we accompany this information with highlights those things where they're relevant.
Councilmember Jenkins.
Yeah, just to follow up, how are we though also engaging with those communities? You may have a township that gets together once a month, they open their mail in front of the, the board meeting, whereas City of St. Paul has staff and people to do that. Mm-hmm. How are we accommodating those differences as well?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Jenkins, the one example, so we haven't really dug into this quite yet. We have not started the data development projects that are involved with some of these new measures. I can tell you from experience in the Community Development Research Department, we've been doing a data collection, our building permit survey, and collecting information about the programs and tools that communities are using to advance affordable housing development. And I know it took a while to right-size things and to make sure that that one, city or township employee does not feel like overburdened by responding to that survey. And I'm sure along the way that meant accepting data in different formats and taking on some of the data entry ourselves or making accommodations like that to try to meet them where they are and not having the same expectation that they can just batch upload things because they don't have the IT systems to do that. And so we have had experience in making those accommodations through other annual survey work that we do. I'm confident that we'll be able to do it here as well. I think the co-creation aspect of that is really important and to take that into consideration. The surveys that we do annually now at this point have close to, if not above, a 90% response rate. So we have achieved making sure that most are included and providing the information to us in a way that is, less painful than it could be otherwise.
Okay, Councilmember Pacheco.
Yeah, Madam Chair. I don't know if this is the right question even, but how do you keep people from not going right to the dollars? So what does this cost? And what is it, if I'm in a smaller community and stuff, this looks great. And before you're finished with the paragraph, there's another paragraph, but how do you keep people focusing on and having less focus on the dollar amount and what moving these programs forward as it seems like it gets more and more expensive. So.
Well, Madam Chair, Councilmember Pacheco, I may invoke the words of Councilmember Wolf in saying that the dollars spent as a measure is generally not where we want to go, right? Because what will the trend show us? That we've increased money, that does not mean we've increased impact. And so we've really advised and worked with our internal staff group that's supported this work in bringing forward these proposed measures to really think about and put forward measures that capture those outcomes and not just outputs. So not just the total grant amount, but what did the grant amount allow to happen? Did it build housing units? Did it build community spaces? So, we have supported that approach, and so we don't actually see a lot of measures here that are expressed that way for that reason. If you were just a point of clarification, I guess, I wasn't sure if you were referring to this program being costly or if you were referring to the proposed measures capturing costs. So I just want to make sure I'm answering your question accurately.
The metrics around this, not just a program cost, but overall what, like I said, even what Mark and Ryan were saying is that if you had a small committee that only meets so often, the first thing they have is a program, second they have is the budget. And that keeps going is how do you avoid having, again, jumping right to the budget and not having the discussions around what you want to, the impact you want to achieve with these metrics?
I think we'll have, Madam Chair, Councilmember Pacheco, I think we'll have to give some thought when we do engagement as to how often that comes up. I think the design of the measures is meant to focus the conversation in a particular way. I'm not sure that we can anticipate the extent to which we'll be pulled in that direction as we engage folks in what these outcomes look like over time. We are not necessarily set up to be, and I think we've said this in previous presentations, but we're not really set up to be like an enterprise performance measure program. And so, dollars are not going to be a big part of the work and the measures that you see here. That doesn't mean they won't invoke those questions. So, I guess we'll cross that bridge. Yeah.
Councilmember Tony Carter.
Thank you.
To my mind, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and as we move forward, and we'll be able to answer so many more of these questions and continue the design of good outcome measures to meet our needs. What I am wanting to ask about right now, though, is some things that you mentioned as you were presenting that I may not have tracked as well as I would have liked to. First of all, I want to make certain that the information you were pointing us to when you gave the website address was the outcomes that we have reviewed before, which you mentioned have changed, haven't tracked all of the changes, but I just wanted to make sure that's the page you were referring to because I didn't hear the whole address.
Oh, yep.
Okay, so that was true, thank you. And then the second thing is, on page 10, at the end of the essential topics recap, around economic competitiveness, infrastructure, and the previous Imagine 2040, and then moving toward economic mobility, wealth creation, entrepreneurs and businesses, and climate resiliency, energy independence. The bottom of the page notes a correlation between the Regional Economic Development Framework in 2020 and the development of the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy for 2025. Can you speak about that process, its status, and when we will be hearing more about that? I'm particularly interested in the work that we have done in the past to align our partner work, or to align to and have all of us work together, and interested in knowing how in the comprehensive economic development strategy work that is happening right now, that is being organized. Can you talk a little bit about that, what we'll see in the short term?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Carter, I believe this item is an information item at next week's Committee of the Whole. An update on the program, as well as like a discussion around that work specifically. And I just am hesitant to speak on behalf of that project team because I don't know the inner workings of it. I've been kind of following along and checking in, though, with them about if there were measures identified in the plan that they are bringing forward to have you all consider for adoption. It's been more of a data-focused conversation and a less of a partner process-focused conversation. So I am afraid that I can't quite speak to that.
It's helpful to know that's coming forward next week.
Yes, it is, yes.
All right, and we will make sure a link to the tool on the page with the tool is sent out to everyone, because it is interesting to take a look and kind of play with it. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is a link farther on in the presentation on page 15.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, Councilmember Lindstrom, and then Councilman Lindstrom.
Just real quickly, I know we're not talking about climate yet, but for the next week's conversation, I was thinking about the state's climate action framework and making sure that we're aligned with that framework. And the state, and you may know this already, I think they hired the U of M Climate Action Partnership, Climate Adaptation Partnership, there we go. And they put out a report just last year called Tracking for Impact. And you'll nerd out about this big time. It's all about what we're talking about tonight for climate-related things. And it's online. Of course. So that's
Wonderful,
handy.
thank
And
you.
it's all about like data sets and which ones are reliable and anyways.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yep.
We'll definitely check that out.
All right, additional? All right, good conversation. Back to you guys.
Wonderful. So I think with that, we'll leave the other two goals, it sounds like, for next week. And then just really quickly wanted to mention, this is the information webpage with the current one-page documents, interactive tool, feedback form, and that will also be an opportunity for public comments to, both the process will be described there as well as the opportunity to initiate your public comment through that feedback form will also be available there. So just wanted to mention that. So next week when we're here again, similar presentation, which I will send soon. We will pick up with the remaining 2 regional goals and probably then plan for any additional conversation around policy measures, if those are of interest. But if there's any other topics or pieces of the program that you'd like to cover, please communicate that, because we'd love to make sure that we've fully addressed it before we ask you to release this amendment for public comment.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any final questions or comments from council members? All right, thank you both.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We're on to now the second information item, which is the public comment budget update and 2026 to 2031 capital program. And we have Ned Smith here, who's not in the room. Oh, there he comes. Ned has returned.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Sorry for the delay. We were waiting for the batter. You don't want to walk in the middle of the at-bat. So I am Ned Smith. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Metropolitan Council, and I am joined with my other partners in finance, which is Matt Selmeyer from Environmental Services, Kristen Prescott from Transit, and Heather Giesel from MTS and CD. So tonight we're going to do an information item to kick off and also wrap up the 2026 unified budget. We're going to start with a brief overview of the calendar, and then we'll do a quick recap on the operating, since you approved the operating budget back in August. We'll walk through the highlights of the 2026 capital program, and then in 2 weeks you will come back to vote on the approval of the entire unified budget. And then it will be out for, actually, I'm already ahead of myself. So it will be out for public comment, and then we will come back on December 3rd to adopt the final budget. And you'll notice that's early, so just as a reminder, we're switching up December. Just the way with the holidays and how that staggering wasn't working, we moved this back a week. And so it'll now be the first Wednesday in December when we adopt the final budgets and levies. So just a quick overview, starting with the operating budget. We have 2 minor changes from what we presented in August. First, regional administration has added about $500,000 for the rental of the Securian real estate next door as we continue to grow and expand and look for other places to house our employees. We will have secured a lease with Securian next year, and so there's $500,000 in there that has been allocated out to divisions. And then Metro Transit has reduced their operating expense by about $7.7 million, and that's due to the planned shutdown, or suspension, of North Star commuter rail in January 26 and converting that to bus operations. So just as a reminder, the operating budget is $1.79 billion. These charts would look very, very similar to what we presented in August, unless you can see $7 million disappearing from a pie chart. But other than that, all of the distributions are the same. The sources and the uses are consistent from August. So now moving on to the capital program. Our entire capital program is $15.07 billion. You can see that about 3/4 of that is in transit and transitways. 25%, 20%-ish is in wastewater, and then CD has the remaining. In terms of categories, expand is growth in the system. Preserve is when we are rehabilitating or rebuilding. So I'm coming from ES. I'm used to talking about relining pipes and reconditioning plants, but this is also a lot then of the work on the blue line and other, as we look to, as those approach 20 years. And there are other components in there that Kristen will walk through. So that's preserve, and then improve is making improvements to an existing. So that could be improving a Wi-Fi, adding a network, improving computer controls, SCAD, I shouldn't, SCADAS, I shouldn't have said it without being able to pull off the computer systems that we use to control our systems. Our sources, you can see, are pretty diversified across the state, local, regional, and federal sources. We've had a little bit of shift from last year on our sources. We've added about $1.02 billion in local funds, but most of that has come away from the state as we have continued to focus to move away from state appropriations for our operations. The passage of the sales tax gave us the ability to rely less on state appropriations from the general fund. So in terms of how does that break down, we have three basic categories. There's authorized and unspent, authorized and spent, and then planned. Authorized is also known as the Authorized Capital Program. That's where funding has been secured and the council has approved those programs through the business items. We do differentiate between spent and unspent because we keep an entire program open until it's complete. So if you think about a $100 million addition or a $100 million plant that we're in the process of building. Let's say we've already spent $60 million to build it, and then there's still $40 million left. The $100 million still stays on the books as an authorized capital program, but the spent versus unspent is we've already spent 60, we have $40 million to go. Planned is the other $6 billion, and that is planned in the next 6 years. So our funding source is identified, but it has not been secured, and the council has not given final approval. In terms of breaking then that amount that is either unspent or planned in the future, you can see now we get a little more skewed towards wastewater. That's primarily because they have some pretty big projects coming up in the next 3 to 5 years, whereas transit's major programs are spread out more over the next 6 years. But that is why wastewater is such a larger component here, and then it shrinks in the future, and why transit is smaller now, but then grows as you look at the CIP. So in 2026, we have of all of these, 2026 has a budget of $1.4 billion, and that is about $400 million is in ES, and the other $1 billion is transit, and again, they will walk through what those components are. So with that, I will turn it over to Matt Selmeyer to discuss the environmental services, unless there are any questions on the overall capital program.
Any questions or comments so far? All right, turn it back to you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Ned. My name's Matt Selmeyer. I'm a finance manager in environmental services, and I'm here today to talk about our capital program for the next 6 years. We also have Kyle Colvin in attendance who can help if there are technical questions. He's my phone a friend. And then we also have Christine Dwyer in attendance, who's our new finance director. Maybe you both want to wave, but so Christine comes to the council with over 20 years of finance and strategy experience. Most recently, she was the business unit CFO for UNFI retail companies and led the transformation growth initiatives for the retail organization, which included technology upgrades, business process improvements, and cost savings. Christine will be gearing up in the coming months and interacting more with the committee and council, and we're happy to have Christine join our team. So welcome. Christine.
Welcome.
So to start, the capital program in environmental services is around $3.1 billion, and the timing of the program is from 2026 through 2031. We have 3 pie charts here. The first is showing our intended uses by department, where we break out spending between our plants and interceptors. And we have a slightly higher percentage of our planned spending in interceptors, which includes work on pipes that collect wastewater as well as lift stations. But the percentages do change over time. It's been 50-50-ish for a little while, but it'll change some as projects develop. The second pie chart shows our uses by category. These percentages don't change much year over year. We have 81% on preserve, which is in line with prior years. We have infrastructure that's 50 to 100 years old, so preservation is making sure we keep everything in good working order. In expand, we do have some growth coming, like our 4th incinerator at Metro plant and the new Rogers treatment plant. And we do have some places where we're putting in larger interceptors to accommodate growth. Lastly, we have improve, which is where we make things better, whether to meet a regulatory requirement or to manage our processes more efficiently. And then the sources of funding, 69% comes from regional, which is our general obligation funds that we issue. After that, 26% is PFA, which stands for Public Facilities Authority, where we get great interest rates. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. And then we finally have PAYGO, which stands for Pay As You Go, where we use our operating funds to pay for capital projects. So our total capital program is around $3.1 billion, which you saw in the last slide, but some of this is for projects that are in progress that have been partially spent, as Ned had alluded to in some of his previous charts. And for future spending, we have $2.57 billion, which is what has been authorized and planned but is unspent. And what's been authorized is generally closer in terms of this planning cycle. What's planned is generally work that is further out. And you can see that we are focusing a bit more on our interceptors in these two charts, but that'll change over time. As I mentioned, those percentages do change. This is just giving a bit more of a definition for preserve, expand, and improve. Preserve is rehabilitating or replacing assets to preserve value. Expand is meeting future capacity needs. And improve is making things better, whether to meet a regulation or improve things like odor or energy use. And this is looking specifically at what's been authorized. So expand and improve are a little higher here because in the short term we have projects like the 4th incinerator at Metro and the new plant at Rogers. And then you can see our authorized program has 53% in interceptors and 47% at our plants, which is consistent with the other slides that we viewed. This is a look at our total capital program over the next 6 years. In the dark blue, we have our authorized capital program. In the light blue, we have our CIP. And in red, you can see a line showing our estimated spending. The red line shows estimated spending at 60%, and that's been the average over the last few years. So we never actually spend all of the amount in our capital program because of constraints you might have in finding a contractor or getting enough support, staffing support to be able to accomplish all the funding. Accomplish all the project work. So this slide is showing you how our 6-year capital program breaks out. We currently have $2.2 billion in the authorized capital program. That's the work that's been approved and a bit more short term. And then looking out a little further, we have $0.9 billion in our capital improvement plan. And that adds to the total of $3.1 billion, which we mentioned earlier in our 6-year capital program. So a little bit more about our capital program financing and the 3 sources we use to pay. The first is Public Facilities Authority. These are funds that come from the federal government to the state. You might have heard of them called state revolving funds. They have really low interest rates. Our most recent was $32 million at 2.68% interest. There is some competition to get the PFA funding, and projects need to meet criteria to qualify, so we can't rely solely on that. We need the other funding sources. Second is our general obligation bonds. They're also really competitive from an interest perspective. And one other thing I like to call it is that we have been able to maintain a AAA bond rating recently, which has helped us to have competitive interest rates. And then finally, we have PAYGO, which has certain advantages, like there is no interest because you're using your operating funds to pay for capital projects as you go. And there's also fewer restrictions that there might be on some of the other funding sources. So that's how we pay for our capital program. And then now the last 2 charts I have here are just to talk a little bit about some updates specific to our capital program. So we have 11 programs for our water resource recovery facilities. 2 of them will be completing very soon, and 2 of them are new. Program 8059 for our Metro rehabilitation facilities improvements will complete in 2026. And Program 8074 for Empire Solids will be closed in 2026. For 2026, we have 2 new programs. Program 8103 and 8104 initiate planning for future facility rehabilitation improvements at Metro and Empire. And then the rest I'll give some updates on quickly. So Program 8062, our cost estimate has increased by $42 million for the 4th incinerator, which is driven by updates for the solids auxiliary system. Program 8078 has an additional $35 million for St. Croix Valley upgrades, including new bar screens and compactors, rehabilitation of the gravity thickener, aeration, HVAC, and several other improvements. Program 8089 has an additional $24 million for renewal of the flood pumping station, odor control improvements, and primary sludge removal at Metro. Program 8097 is increasing by $29 million at Blue Lake. This includes capacity expansion and asset preservation projects for liquids and solids. Program 8099 is increasing by $2.1 million. That includes construction of the new Crow River Water Resource Facility in Rogers. So the final slide I have here today is just to show you our 30 projects in our Interceptor program. The thing I'd like to point out is that these projects do cover the entire metro area, as you can see, so certainly not targeting any one specific area. There's a lot of work to do rehabilitation, replacement. We also have to address odor control and make improvements where necessary. These project additions total $225 million. $67 million is for north area interceptor improvements, includes replacing 60,000 feet of interceptors to put in larger pipes. $52 million is for lift station improvements located across the metro, but things like specifically like electrical improvements and structural rehabilitation. $50 million is for in the southern metro. $31 million is for deep tunnel inspection in our odor program. $16 million is for interceptor work in Minneapolis, and the rest are for work on meters, work in St. Paul, and other rehabilitation projects. So with that, I'll stand for any questions on the environmental services portion of our capital program.
All right, thank you, Matt. Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you. The first question is on slide 12, proposed capital program. Are those typos for where the millions are at the top? That's supposed to be.
You know what, Madam Chair, council members, yes, that should be $2,178,000,000. Okay. $936 million for a total $3.1 billion capital program.
Yeah, it's not necessarily, Councilmember, a typo. It's just a confusing way of, it's like 1,000 millions.
It's like
right. Right out of government speak right there, 1,000 millions.
Okay, I was just, Okay, and then the second question was on the map for page 15. Is there a way for council members to identify the number locations specifically? I mean, I can tell which ones are in my region just by looking at the map, but
Madam Chairman.
Can we specify the actual city at some point?
By this, Madam Chair, council members, so you are looking for us to have a map that's broken out by city? Is that what you're requesting?
Yes, that corresponds to these codes or the numbers. So, for example, I can see that like 29 is somewhere near Brooklyn Park, but.
My phone a friend is
here.
Phone a
friend. Kyle, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the council. We do have, each year we publish a capital program booklet, and that booklet contains a breakdown of all of the projects by council district with estimates of the cost and a construction or a project timetable. So that booklet was just published on our website, I think maybe a week before last. We could certainly provide you with the link. They're in the process of being printed now. I can certainly bring a stack of those if you're interested in having a hard copy too, but it is available.
Be very environmental.
Excuse me. But a link would be great. Yeah. Councilmember Carter.
Thank you. On that point, I know that we received booklets that had projects listed within our districts, and it may not be a bad idea to get a copy of those pages for our districts so that we can insert them.
Councilmember or Kyle, let's start there.
I will deliver a stack of those books as soon as they're available to the council at one of the future meetings.
Yeah, and I didn't mean a whole big book, but.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And if they're pages
Yes,
for
they are.
each district, that would be great. Thank
We
you.
can provide those electronically too.
That'd be good.
And we'll relay that to our community relations people too, that we will get, those things get updated every time we do this, like, because the projects change. So we'll make sure that there's updated versions as we put out this information.
Thank you.
All right, additional questions or comments? All right. Oh, pardon me, Councilmember Cameron.
Yeah, Just a basic question about the split between interceptors and plants. Is that, as we're budgeting, is that typical for how we would split, how we would project splits? We're not expecting that 55-45 range split between plants and interceptors. Is that what we would anticipate going forward? Or is there anything of note with that split as we're looking at it now? Might it change in the coming years? Or is that just what we predict over time?
Madam Chair, council members, it will change over time. It will waffle back and forth between the percentages depending on the ages of the infrastructure and what we need to, what our engineering folks are saying from a criticality standpoint we need to focus on. I would phone a friend again if there's, I think if we're looking further out than 6 years, I think it would potentially waffle back again at some point.
Yes, Madam Chair, Councilmember Cameron, that's correct. The split between interceptors and plants has just been a historic split between the assets that we own, generally speaking. And that split does fluctuate from one year to the next. In the 26 program that we're talking about today, we've got a new treatment plant up in the Rogers, which is about 160 million, and then worth of work. And then we also have the fourth incinerator down at Metro. That's about 260 million. So that has skewed a lot of those costs. These are all based on cash flow expectations. Once those projects get completed, we're likely to see that shift go more toward the interceptor system. So it kind of ebbs and flows and shifts between those two pots. But generally speaking, it ranges 60-40 to 50-50.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That was, I think that was actually my surprise that plants made up such a significant proportion, because when we look at the system, it is primarily an interceptor system. And so I just wanted to gain an understanding of what level of frequency plants require updates, that if that's continues to be a major budget item in terms of frequency of updates.
Yeah, Madam Chair, that there's always work going on at all of our treatment facilities. But as I indicated in this plan, there's a number of large projects in the treatment plants that has skewed or added more of the cash flow needs in that particular area. I think the split was more heavily on the interceptors, which refers to or reflects a lot of the preservation work that we're doing right now on asset renewal.
Thank you.
All right, additional questions, comments, Councilmember Carter?
Just one question, and this is likely more from the financial perspective. As we look at the projects, there's a lot of 60-40 kind of splits, the 60-40-ish between local and regional funding and state and federal funding, the 60-40-ish or so between the projects that we get done and that are left uncompleted in the timeframe. And I'm wondering to what extent we are concerned about funds that may be left and unspent, and how we care for those funds to make sure that we have them into the future, especially in this timing. I'm concerned about those kinds of things. And how does that factor into our plans for the next 6 years?
I'm sure I can take a quick stab, and then my phone a friend Kyle will help me clarify anything I missed. So my understanding is that items that are not completed do not leave the capital program. So if we have something that doesn't get done because it's part of that 40%, it would stay on the capital program. And if it doesn't get done in the next 6 years, it would still be there to get done into the future.
Does that mean that all of the dollars are in the bank? In other words?
Madam Chair, we will continue to need to find funding on an annual basis to support our capital program, whether that's through PFA or GO bonds or pay as you go.
And Madam Chair and Councilmember, we don't borrow to that amount. We only look 12 months out at our cash flow needs. So we will only look at what are the projects we think we complete in the next 12 months. So we will not put $400 million in the bank.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. We don't have it, so we don't worry about losing it.
All right, additional questions? Okay. On to transportation.
Okay. Good evening, Madam Chair, council members. My name again is Kristen Prescott. I'm Acting Finance Director for Metro Transit, and I'm here to present the Transportation Division capital programs. So our Transportation Division operates, administers, and coordinates public services for the Twin Cities metro area. Metro Transit has regular routes and express bus, metro lines, including the light rail and bus rapid transit, North Star, and then the capital project development, and that includes the light rail extensions and the BRT projects. For Metropolitan Transit Services, they have contracted buses, the special transportation services, planning, transit link, and van pool. Okay, so our capital program priorities for 2026 to 2031. For Metro Transit, we're investing in our bus fleet. That includes 224 replacement buses to replace our current fleet that is reaching its useful life. We're adding 66 additional buses as we continue to build back our pre-COVID service levels, and then 43 electric buses following our Metropolitan Council zero-emission bus transition plan. We're maintaining our light rail system in a state of good repair. As you know, our light rail system is aging. Blue Line started service in 2004 and Green Line in 2014. So we're needing to substantially invest in maintaining the associated infrastructure. We're also preserving support facilities and building out where needed for service expansion. And then we're rejuvenating our public facilities and technology. So these investments will increase accessibility, safety, and comfort, and better facilitate customer use of transit. For Metropolitan Transportation Services, or MTS, they're replacing buses based upon existing fleet replacement plan, meet Metro Mobility fleet demand to comply with federal and state mandates, focusing on programming subrecipient federal formula earnings in Maple Grove, Plymouth, and the U of M only, technology, and engine and transmission replacements. So our revenue assumptions for this capital program, we're anticipating a 3.3% increase per year for our regional transit capital. We're investing in our regional sales tax, and that's based on the criteria. Our state funding includes appropriations and motor vehicle sales tax. We're assuming a 2.5% increase in our formula funding. This includes the 5307 formula funds, our 5337 state of good repair for light rail and bus, and our 5339 bus facilities. We also have some assumptions for our federal regional solicitation. We have $25 million in our capital program for future ABRT projects, and then an estimated $14 million for other capital projects. And finally, we have our new starts and small starts. Those are at the project level, and that includes the federal CIG funding, county funding, city, as well as regional solicitation. So what I have here is, so our CIP summarizes our transit capital projects into 6 categories. These are just the listing of those 6 with the definitions, just to provide for your information. So I won't go through those. But our transit capital program is at $11.42 billion. You can see in the uses by category that our transit ways make up about 67% of our uses by category. That's where our light rail extension projects and our bus rapid transit are housed in. We have fleet at 14% of our program. That's including the replacement fleet that is reaching its useful life, as well as the electric buses and the other additional buses. In the middle, we have uses by type. You can see the expansion is quite large there, but if you take out the transit ways, which are also included, it becomes a lot smaller. But those projects include, besides the transit way, include electric bus infrastructure, and then our transit information systems. We have preservation at 3.1 billion, or 27% of our uses by type. And that includes keeping our existing assets in a state of good repair. And again, that's the bus replacement. And we also have buses, the SUVs, and vans on the Metro MTS side. On the far right is our sources. You can see locals at 40%. That's for our transitway projects, mainly the Blue Line extension. Federal at 37%, and then state and regional are also included. And then our transit future spending is at 6.26 billion. On the left-hand side, you'll see our authorized spending at 1.37, so that is the unspent portion of the authorized. On the right-hand side is our plan, so that is spending that's in the CIP but not yet authorized. You can see the transit ways, that includes the Blue Line extension. Our fleet, which we had highlighted earlier, the buses, and we have other category at 577 million. This includes several of our capital budget priorities. Some of the projects in there would be our electric bus fire protection, and of course the renovation of the Franklin LRT station. And then we have facilities at 8%, and that would include things like our North Loop garage expansion and electric bus infrastructure. Any questions on Metro, on the Transportation Division?
Any questions? All right, then we're moving to community development.
So Heather had to step away, so my name is Carson Wentz, and I will be filling in for Ms. Giesel. So on the CD, thank goodness she takes notes. So we will talk about this community development capital program now. In terms of the overall capital program, our uses by department represents where funding will go. 100% of parks funds will be passed through. 378 million will go to implementing agencies based on funding formulas. 57 million will go to implementing agencies through the land acquisition program on a first-come, first-served basis. We have 88 million for legislative earmarks, and the remaining 6 million represents the equity grant program. 83% of funds go directly to parks implementing agencies. 16% go to projects as directed by the legislature, and the final 1% is HRA expense, which we'll expand upon in a later slide. Funds are used to preserve, improve, and expand the park system and support council-owned property within HRA. In terms of future spending, we have $483 million planned. Authorized funds are passed through via grant agreements to the parks implementing agencies and communities identified by the legislature to receive direct appropriations. Future spending in our CIP represents planned projects to preserve, improve, and expand the park system, as well as HRA capital expenses.
Sorry to interrupt you. I think you're one slide behind.
Thank you.
There you go.
I'm going to trust that, well, I'm going to hope that those numbers still stuck in your head as opposed to reading my notes again. My apologies. In terms of parks and open space, the Twin Cities metropolitan area is home to a system of regional parks and trails that are nationally renowned for their beauty, size, and variety of features. There are 58 regional parks and park reserves totaling more than 65,000 acres, 485 miles of interconnected trails, and 8 special recreation features. The regional park system has had over 66 million visits in 2024. Commitment to equity in parks and open space is woven throughout our policy documents, projects, and through the equity grant program. Notable modifications to the program include that we anticipate the council will continue to match state of Minnesota appropriations as directed by statute or council policy. For adjustments, we start with a base of our approved 25 through 30 CIP. and our adjustments are primarily removing 25 from the CIP and adding the 2031 forecast to the CIP. For 2031, we have programmed legacy and ENRTF revenues and expenses into the CIP. For regional parks capital funding, 100% of our parks capital funds are passed through the following programs. 3 of our 4 grant programs are sourced through state funds, several of which are distributed by formula. The council provides a match in 2 out of 4 of these grant programs and fully funds the equity grant program. Funds are passed through via grant agreements, and we currently have over 188 active grants valued at $172 million. We anticipate awarding about $230 million in grant funds in the next 6 years. In terms of our council-owned housing capital program, that is at $4.52 million. A quick history of the council-owned housing. The council has statutory authority to develop housing units. Whoops. In 1999, the council acted to establish the Family Affordable Housing Program, or FAHP. HUD provided the council with $28 million, and the council purchased 150 units in the open housing market, and we still operate those same units today. 4 more units were purchased through the partnership with the City of Edina in 2022, and in 2024, we sold 5 with intentions to replace them. 2 have been purchased and 3 more are planned. We continue to budget small and routine repairs in the annual operating budget, but large improvements like roofs, siding, internal remodeling are programmed and tracked in our capital program. We currently have $2 million authorized for Family Affordable Housing Program capital, and an additional $350,000 per year from 2027 through 2031 is planned to be used to preserve the council-owned housing. And with that, Madam Chair and members of the committee, I'll take any other questions.
Make them hard.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is your opportunity to ask Ned really hard questions.
Please
so.
don't ask me about community development.
Any questions from council members? Well, if you do have additional follow-up, definitely reach out to Heather on that piece. So I think we'll be good. Any final comments, questions? All right, thank you all, and appreciate you pitching. Do you have a final thing you want to say now?
I just want to thank the outstanding work with the finance teams, as well as RA Budget. Stuart McMullen and his team do the yeoman's work to put all this together, and it's a partnership, and we're grateful to all who, for their blood, sweat, and tears to get this ready to go.
Very good call-outs. Thank you. All right, and we're on to our final information item tonight, which is Committee of the Whole discussion. We have Sam O'Connell and Michael Hunter to present to us. Welcome. Oh, and Elijah.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members. Thank you for the time. I was looking back and 3/5 of the community relations team was in front of you last January to talk about all the good work that you did in the year previous. So we're back again, and on our work plan as we took a look at 2025 was to work with you a little bit more deeply to talk about the processes that support your decision making. And one of those is the Committee of the Whole. And I'm remiss that we're not talking about committee at a Committee of the Whole. So this is our opportunity, though, to really kind of dig in and make sure that we are in alignment. We talked about this as modernization, but I think really what it is just making sure that the Committee of the Whole is providing the space and information that is needed for your decision making. With me tonight, I have 2 of my colleagues. If they're unknown to you, then we're doing something wrong. So I have Michael and Elias with me, and they will actually carry the bulk of this presentation. I also want to acknowledge Mi Chang in this room as well, because she has been a big help as we get into alignment. So with that, Madam Chair, I'd like to hand this off to my colleagues.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. For the public, I am Michael Sund. I'm the community relations consultant, so I work with Sam and all of the council members to help you work in the public and also help with your decision-making processes. So tonight we're talking, as Sam said, about committee of the whole. Am I able to do this? Yep. Two quick things to start it off. One, we are talking about a policy process tonight, but I want to be clear that we're not suggesting this is the only way it could ever be, right? We know that the council has to remain adaptable, so this is not going to be the only way that you would see a committee of the whole presentation. This is just a suggested general way that we would go about it, right? And the other thing is we're typically what we try to do is go to meetings with you, experience the council as you experience the council. And the reason for that is that hopefully we can then take that feedback back to staff and improve the process by which you are presented information. But we might get it wrong. So if there is any thing you see in here that's you're not sure about, please ask us questions at the end of the presentation and bring up any feedback. This isn't set in stone. So first, some of the things that we heard about ways we could improve the committee of the whole. In general, a sense that it lacks a sort of consistency or role in the policymaking process. So we have also heard, separate from that council members have often talked about a desire to hear information a little bit earlier in the policy process so that they can provide early input into what's happening, and to use the time that you are providing to us efficiently. So that would mean a full agenda with good, high-quality information, things you can really think about and provide your perspective as a policymaker in that discussion. And so what we're proposing is to basically use the committee of the whole earlier in the process. That's the main thrust of this whole suggestion, is to take the committee of the whole and bring it back to the beginning of the policy process. During the ideating kind of phase, when you're talking in an early part about your ideas, and you can have a robust discussion there, and then staff can take that, and when you go to your committee work, you'll see more in-depth discussions based off of that earlier discussion, right? They'll take that feedback and dive deep in your committees. And then the committee chairs can bring that back up at if a decision needs to be made at a council itself. So it's essentially saying, as much as possible, using the committee of the whole early on in the process. And so that's one of the core principles is early engagement. The other one is strategic alignment. So we want to make sure that when you talk about larger regional impacting initiatives, that you have time to discuss it in terms of alignment with other initiatives that are happening. And how you do that is by talking about it a little bit earlier. It'll also provide some clarity, hopefully not only to you, but to the public of why are you discussing this when, right? So why are you talking about this now? Well, if it's the early part of the discussion, this is the part you want to pay attention to. Right? This is when it's not a fully formed idea. When it comes up at the end, it might be a time when it has been discussed thoroughly and it's fairly set in stone in terms of what's happening. And it allows for us to use that time just a little bit more efficiently. This is the key slide. If I had one that I wanted you to pay attention to, it's this one. It's my favorite little diagram that I put together, and it outlines the whole process. So in this case, what we're trying to do is in the top corner, you'll see standing committee chairs. We want to elevate the role of the standing committee chairs to be the ones to take feedback from council members on specific issues that their committees represent, bring that to the chair of the Metropolitan Council, and she will then review that with staff, set the agenda for the committee of the whole, and then staff will go back and present issues. When they present, they'll present broadly as much as possible. They'll try to take a horizon scan approach to that presentation to give you as much early information as you can have. You'll have a discussion, and then following that discussion, we'll take that feedback and distribute it back down to the committees for the actual work of it, so the individual standing committees. Want to be clear that still includes things like work groups. It could include, special project committees, which we have several of, and other subcommittee work. And then any decisions that need to come out of that would then float back up to the Metropolitan Council. Now, again, I want to be clear that not all policies or procedures are going to follow that process, but generally that is what we're suggesting, is that we bring the committee of the whole earlier, go work through the standing committees, and then come back up to the Metropolitan Council. With that, I will pass it off to my colleague Elias to review some roles and responsibilities.
Thanks, Michael. Good evening, Madam Chair and council members. My name is Elias Montessa. Of course, I would not be doing my job if you didn't know who I was, but for the folks at home, I'm the community relations specialist. I work with many of you on Sam O'Connell's team here. So I am pleased to be here to talk about roles and responsibilities in this process for you all. Starting out with the chair of the Met Council, of course, as Michael mentioned, the chair of the Met Council selects topics for the Committee of the Whole agenda in consultation with the committee chairs, guides the Committee of the Whole discussions, and directs issues to the appropriate standing committees or work groups for additional, deeper discussion. The standing committee chairs in this proposed framework facilitate potential topics going to the chair, accept referrals from the Committee of the Whole to their standing committees, and lead their committees in developing and refining those policy proposals. For council members who are not the chair or chairs of standing committees, you also have a very important role in this. Your role is to propose topics for consideration to the committee chairs. You can also propose topics to us, and we'll help kind of relay those to the committee chairs and the chair of the Met Council. Participate actively and deeply in discussions and provide high-level policy direction at the Committee of the Whole in response to some of those presentations that are coming up. The cabinet, directors, and council staff will prepare and deliver those contextual presentations to the Committee of the Whole. They'll track discussion outcomes and develop policy options in response to those for presentation at standing committees. And then, of course, you have community relations, us, and our friends in admin services. So we help to manage and support the Committee of the Whole agenda setting process, facilitate communication, and ensure procedural integrity as we go along there.
Madam Chair.
Regional Administrator.
Hey, Elias, just one piece to that last slide, because it's still like newer language here structurally. So just to make sure I clarify exactly who cabinet involves on that slide, that's the executive directors or general managers of all of the operating divisions, myself, and then the chief of staff. That's the group that we're talking about. But it's kind of new in the last 18 months. I had someone stop me recently and just ask exactly who it was. I wanted to clarify who we're talking about.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. So things that we have that support this work. First off, we have the annual work plan. So this is an annual process that each division goes through to kind of set the direction for what they want to deal with in the upcoming year. Routine items that appear at Committee of the Whole or Council will also appear in the work plan. So there's kind of a benchmark as to when they'll happen. We also have new administrative procedures. So of course, staff and community relations, chief of staff, executive assistants, and administrative services are now in place. And then we also have the cabinet, like the regional administrator mentioned, and the standing agenda that is a little bit more in alignment in recent months. We also have council member support. Of course, I have to plug us several times as I'm speaking here. You do have dedicated community relations staff that can help support and document these issues as they come up and forward them along to standing committee chairs and the chair of the Met Council. So we want to help kind of crystallize those ideas and forward them along and kind of condense things into unified presentations, bless you, that make sense for the work that we're trying to do. And with that, I will pass it back off to Michael.
Thanks. So we just wanted to talk quickly about a couple other things that are part of this initiative. So presentation standards. Overall, we're trying to level up presentations as much as possible so that they are understandable to you in a simple format without taking away any of the complexity needed to bring across these ideas that I think you're familiar with at this point. The council covers some fairly complex topics. Overall, we are working with a consultant partner who is going through and working with the various divisions to review how they present information to provide some consistency to it along with the communications department. But overall, the theme of it is a focus on clarity, the governing process, and then those policy questions that you get asked. And especially with committee of the whole presentations, we want to focus on the sort of exploratory nature, the early conversations, like I mentioned earlier. Some examples of topics that we have heard you talk about that could be potential topics at a future committee of the whole is to raise up some of these issues that you'll see here on the screen. You may see something that you recognize, you may see something you want to explore at a deeper level, or you may be thinking of something, oh gosh, I want to add that to the list. It's a good thing to mention to us, and we will make sure that it is added over time. And as council members continue to express interest in topics, we'll bring that up to the standing committee chairs and the chair herself to add to the agenda. So what are the next steps? You are here now at the October 8th Metropolitan Council meeting, so we're discussing this. After that, Ryan will bring it to the cabinet, and then we'll have it brought over to the leadership meeting, so that's the standing committee chairs and the chair to discuss, and then we'll begin to implement a process. Hopefully we've laid out clear goals and kind of what we're thinking of when we're talking about this topic. But it is still open to discussion and influence. With that, we have a few proposed questions which we offered in the presentation, and we would welcome any other feedback you have.
Thank you. Start over here, Councilmember Cedarburg.
Thank you so much. This is something that Sam and I have talked about for probably 3 years since I started on the council. A couple things. One is when you're talking about putting together your presentation standards, hopefully you'll engage a council member on those presentation standards for what we like to see. And the other thing is, it's the process versus perfection. And I'd like to see embedded the word agility and nimble in here just a little bit. So we don't need to get the full story all the time, but it would be nice to highlight issues that might come up that would just be maybe 10 minutes or something that we're going to see this on the horizon and everybody's talking about it, like the high volume water users or something, and that it will come in a future event, more discussion or something. But I know all the agendas have to be planned out, but we still have to be nimble and agile to kind of tackle some of these things a little bit more quickly. And it's tough with the way that it's organized, and it's tough with a large group. But I think we can do ourselves a lot of good service by highlighting some of these things. And for the public, they can recognize, oh, the council is addressing that, or they are aware. So the awareness issue as well.
Thank you for those comments, and I think it's well timed. I mean, that's why we're talking about this framework relative to the committee of the whole, because some of those agendas for our business stuff is pretty well planned out in the future and hard to adjust in order for us to make all of our timelines. So this is sort of what's prompting some of this. Councilmember Chambliss?
Yeah, thanks for giving some of the background and your feedback, Councilmember Cedarburg. I was kind of wondering if this was coming from a particular framework in terms of how we structure the committee of the whole, and in terms of, having for example, the committee chairs coming up with some ideas and collaborating with the Met Council chair, and then the level of responsibilities. Is it adopted after another entity, or the way that we've done things in the past, or and how many people provided feedback? So I just kind of wanted to have a little bit more background information.
Sure. Madam Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, part of this is a culmination of the work that we have heard from council members in particular. If I could maybe provide an example, I think there are great ideas that emanate in so many different places within the council. Sometimes it's in a work group, sometimes it's in a standing committee, sometimes it's in an advisory group. And what this is trying to accomplish is provide a more transparent way of bringing those items to the council as a whole, to also just provide that opportunity to explore all the corners of a room before we begin to move this through a standing committee process and ultimately some technical analysis potentially or additional staff work. And then as that comes through the council. So I think the part that we're really excited about, Councilmember Chambliss, is the part that you've identified are the roles and responsibilities here of standing committee chairs, of also the chair of the council, as well as staff and RA. I would also offer up that, as Michael mentioned, that this is also a responsibility for us as staff. I would love to say that if we move forward with this, you won't see 75 slide presentations. There may be a chance that you still might see that, but our hope is that we are also laying out the expectations and that we are bringing more of that clarity, not only here internally, but the folks that are watching us today in terms of the public as well. I hope that answers your question.
It does, and as a follow-up to that, in terms of the council members having a greater opportunity to shape policy discussions, I was glad to see that there were some suggested tools because I think we could address helping council members shape that policy a little bit better, but it is going to require that council members are able to get that information in a way that they can consume and shape with, given our resources and our time and our ability and what we have access to. So I don't know if this is going to kind of be progressive in the way that it's developed or if this is a pilot, but I think it's a good start, but also keeping in mind that, our part-time council members do have some limitations.
Thank you for your comments. Councilmember Jenkins.
So this sort of plays on a little bit of what Councilmember Chambliss and Councilmember Cedarburg have already talked about. But since this is all new to me, I'm going to present it from a different perspective. One of the concerns I would have is because things aren't fully baked yet, not to get into a 72-slide presentation on 72 different possibilities for how this could work out. So I have a concern about that, and I almost wonder if on slide 8, where we talk about council member responsibilities, can there be a component to this to say, we will get you the reports a week in advance or whatever, so we can do the homework and take that 72-slide presentation maybe down to 20? Assuming we do our homework before we get in, so we can focus on discussion and not just on 40-minute presentation and 10-minute discussion. And I don't know if we've done that in the past, how that fits into the proposal, but that would be something I would look for.
Madam Chair, if I may, Councilmember Jenkins, that's exactly, if I can marry and bridge the two comments, I think your capacity is something that we're very aware of. That is the one thing around the table that is finite. And I think this is an opportunity for us to both give you space to as a platform to have those more discovery conversations, but not be, in the details that you're not able to think past that as well. So this will be a little bit of trial and error, if I can be completely honest, as we right-size this for everybody. But we are, as a team, very open to feedback. So I would offer, let's see how we do, and if we need to tweak, we are more than happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Tyrone Carter and then Councilmember Wells.
Yeah, my question is, I always like to look at it from a historical standpoint. I would like, at some point, we don't have to have it today, I'd like to get some insight into the history of the CAL. Why was it created? And when it was created, usually like when a new bill comes in, they have legislative notes and things like that, and they'll tell you what the original intention. So I'd like to get some insight into what the original intention was, and also what similar bodies that exist to the CAL in other areas, and are there some things that we can learn from them if we can incorporate, or maybe we're doing a lot of things better than we think we are, but it'd give us more perspective, I think.
All right, Councilmember Wolf, and then Councilmember Tony Carter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things I've noticed with committee as a whole is when we get the meeting materials, it's just a presentation, unless it's the safety and security update. It's just a presentation, and there's no notes to read ahead of time to kind of get your brain around what you're going to be talking about. For me, that's really important to have those notes, both because then I can go back, if I can't remember, I can go back and look at the memo to kind of refresh myself, rather than watching a whole video to see what was said, or having things spoon-fed to me one slide at a time. It's kind of building on what Councilmember Jenkins said. So I would like to get back to having some materials to get my head in the right space. And that way we can spend more time discussing rather than being talked at.
Thank you. Councilmember Tony Carter, and then Cedarburg.
So much of this dovetails into other comments that have already been made, so I'll just on that simply say that, when I used to work for IBM, we always had this thing about bringing people along as we were trying to implement some sort of solution. And it was real simple. Tell them what you told them, tell them, and tell them what you're gonna tell them. And I appreciate that as we're all talking about what we need to stay on track in the limited capacity and time of council members, we have a team of thinkers who will help to bring us along and ensure that we have the kind of information that we need from meeting to meeting, the background, that we need to stay on track, and an understanding of where we're going. So that's really a thank you, and just hopefully a summary of what we've said in that regard. I also just wanted to highlight that you've spoken to the standing agenda. And, as we know, we do feel sometimes as though things that show up and they come from out of nowhere, and it's like you got to be ready right then. Having that standing agenda, seeing it ahead of time, and being prepared and knowing what's coming is really, really, really helpful to us, especially as we're thinking about things that we want to have the opportunity to deliberate together around, but that may be, coming up. And sometimes they're a surprise and we're not quite ready when they come. So having that standing agenda prepared and shared, I think will really help with that. In the area of, what we want to be able to do, in the beginning of the presentation, you talked about lacking opportunities. I'm not sure exactly what it was called. And I think one of those is really to be able to spend more time couching our work inside regional trends. We're looking at the outcomes that we need, of course, as we put together 2050, and we want to stay within that context, but also be able to have that information available as we're talking about potential policy about where we are, what our needs are, and where we're going as context for the discussions that we're having. So I think the data that we're looking at in 2050 is really very important. We're a research organization. We have data already that I think we need to keep more in front of us as we have our discussions. So I take every opportunity, hopefully, to talk to that, and I'm thankful that we're seeing more and more of the rich store of data that we have. And lastly, on presentation standards, that was the point I was making. It was really very helpful, for example, in Community Development Committee, to just see the data around where we are with 60 and 80% housing as opposed to 30% AMI housing, for example. And so that kind of information, as we continue to discuss policy, I think will be very, very helpful for us to always keep that in front of us, because sometimes we wonder, why are we doing this? And should we do something else? And I just think that the information about where we are pointing to, where we are, and where, what we need to do to cure that gap is always helpful. Thank you.
Councilmember Cedarburg, then.
Thank you. So if we go back, I just wanted to say that there's an incredible benefit to this process. And that is, if you look at the list of potential topics, they cross multiple standing committees. And so we have to bring all our council members along as to why it might, like, large water users. It's regional planning, parks, environmental services. So we have to bring that information up so all the council members who are in these different committees can understand how it affects what their committee is. But to push and to process a policy, it usually is assigned to one standing committee. And so that's why it's so important for the whole council to understand, and it may be put in one committee, but if everybody doesn't understand what's going on for their committee, then they don't understand it. So I think we're going to see more and more of these issues go across lots of multiple standing committees. And so we have to think about how we maybe assign them and everything, but then we'll all be kind of educated and understand why it's in one standing committee, but some of those issues might be in multiple standing committees. They're getting more complex, our issues.
And I would say, like, we do a review of sort of the standing agenda, kind of going out, at least getting a window so we kind of know, so we can come up with something that gets sent out. We'll figure out what the frequency of that going out is. I think that, it's really important, even as council members, like, I go check agendas just to make sure I know what's going on in some of the other committees. But again, to Councilmember Chan, council members are part-time. And so it's figuring out how to manage some of that, but you do want some of that. So maybe we'll figure out some tool that we get sent out for you.
I'd just like to follow up on that, and that's why it's important. So if we see it early on the council of the whole, we'll know what's coming up. And so it prepares us to go and look for it, get it.
Councilmember Lindstrom.
Yeah, thanks. So most of our committee of the wholes are sit and get information. And I was thinking, kind of tossing it back to you three about thinking about different ways to get information from this body other than like what we're doing now, like questions and having discussion like this. Maybe there are other facilitation techniques where we are standing up and moving around after sitting for an hour and a half, and we're going up and we're doing, the big Post-it note kind of things. Or maybe, I don't know if this is possible in open meeting law, but breaking out into groups of 2 or 3 or something, and having a 10-minute conversation about brainstorming. I love the idea of brainstorming and bringing these things early for ideation. So I guess I'll toss it back to you. I was thinking about what we did with Imagine 2050 and that, at least in environmental services, how we kind of got all these big sheets and walked around and got the juices flowing up here a little bit better. So maybe there's ways to do it different.
You intrigue Sam, so I'll turn it to Sam.
Madam Chair, Councilmember, I'm about to just jump out of my seat right now because my facilitator hearts, and I think as well as my colleagues, are jumping out right now. This is exactly what we were hoping would be as part of the conversation. Doesn't always have to be how it's always been. And so we're looking to explore that creative space with you. If we really think about the idea of a committee of the whole is to do that environmental scan, to really kind of surface ideas, it doesn't always happen like this. So I would offer up, we are 110% open to doing that differently as well. That feels comfortable for you all. I would also offer up, we have a lot of expertise that's within the council. There's also a lot of expertise outside of the council too. There may be benefits where it'd be nice to bring in a keynote speaker, if you will, on a certain idea. And to Councilmember Carter's point about somebody who's been doing this work outside of our region maybe, or just, getting a good idea of how others are also tackling similar issues is something that sits so nice in the context of a committee of the whole. So emphatic yes, Councilmember Lindstrom, and we would be very interested in exploring that with you.
Great.
Okay, Councilmember Chambliss?
I just wanted to stamp that comment as well and say that I think there would be a lot of value as an organization that is seen as a convener of experts and stakeholders, and having the Committee of the Whole be one of the vehicles that we might use. Or maybe not, maybe it's not the Committee of the Whole. All the ideas that are coming forward don't have to necessarily be in one box, but could add value.
Thank you for your comments. Councilmember Pacheco.
Yes, Madam Chair, members, I like the discussion. I like really planning for the policy. It takes me a little longer to understand the policy. I'm just a street kid. But one of the things I would like to see that's beyond the policy is responding to constituents. Is there a consistent form that I go? Because I get quite a few, and Elias helps me out, and I know who's responding. I know the question, but if there's a format that I know, I can always go back to within my district here. That would be very helpful. And then who the key players are in there and what's coming up. I mean, that I can see what's coming up in the bigger picture here, but there's a lot of things going on. I go to quarterly meetings in Bloomington and Richfield, and they all have their agenda alike. So if I could just see even that infrastructure around customer service or even community management here, that would be great.
All right, any additional thoughts, questions? I appreciate, oh, sorry, Councilmember Cameron, sorry. I got to turn the corner.
The previous chair was used to having me sit over here. At first, I love the idea of the ideation phase before it goes to committee. I think, and one thing I wanted to extend is that beyond the 4 core committees, thinking about some of the other committee work. So an obvious example is what's going through audit. If there's anything that is going to be tackled by the audit committee, or equity, or, some of these other committees that are of significant decision-making to our body, but we don't really have an opportunity to weigh in on, but the committee chairs feel that there would be value to that. So I just want to extend consideration to that as well. And then, I know Robert's not here, but I also, this feels very much like a committee of the whole structure when I turn it to the chairs and ask for the chairs of the committees, and Judy's not here either, but how are you thinking about how you might prioritize what you would put before committee of the whole, so that we as members have a good sense of what you are thinking about and where we might want to offer our feedback on what could be included.
I would say, I think, and we're also getting a little close on time, but I think part of it is there's just going to be a responsibility of the dynamic between the standing committee chairs and council members, to have a two-way discussion, so make sure that, the committee chairs are taking information from their members and the members feel comfortable bringing it there, but then I see it almost as the standing committee chairs become the advocates to raise something up. And I don't know if that kind of gets to what your thinking is, and I think they can come from all areas. We've got our standing committees, but once we implement it across that, it should become part of our normal functioning, whether it's coming from the EAC or audit, because that's how we work, I think. I don't know, does that help?
A little, yeah.
It's a new process.
Yeah.
So I think, but I think it will be very good. So first, I want to thank Sam, Michael, and Elias. This is really, really good work. The one thing I do want to say about it, it's a new process, which means some things are going to work and some things are not. And so we just need to make sure we have a dialogue. And my also big ask of everybody is that dialogue is, when we're working with our staff, that it both be honest and very respectful, because we are trying something different. So, but we do want the feedback to find out what's working, to get some of these messages out. And we will definitely be working with the committee chairs to try and make sure, we build this into our practices to figure out how we'll apply it. Anybody have any other final comments? All right, well, thank you all. We really appreciate it. And looking forward to trying this out and see how it works. All right, we're on to reports. I have one report before I turn it to council members. So I want to just mention briefly that the U.S. DOT, if you weren't aware, announced on Friday, October 3rd, a new and significant change to the DBE program through the publication of an interim final rule. This rule removes the race and gender-based presumptions of social and economic disadvantage in the DBE program. So as you can imagine, it is quite significant for us as an organization. We are actively working on understanding all of the impacts and also coordinating with partners across the administration who are similarly impacted, and we will be getting information out to all of you as soon as we can with some additional detail. If you have any questions, contact myself or Administrator O'Connor. Do you have anything to add?
Nothing on that, Madam Chair. I think you got it.
Okay, all right. Councilmember Chambliss.
Yeah, is it possible to get information on what that rule is?
Of course, we can send it out. It's pretty good you can find it in the Code of Federal Regulations. It was published Friday. Okay, we'll get it sent out.
Thank you.
All right. Very good. All right, any reports from council members? All right, Regional Administrator.
Madam Chair, we'll stay on the federal theme. I'll do federal shutdown pieces. This is all kind of overlapping in timing, but the DB rule is not related to the federal shutdown. But except it sort of is, because as the rule changed, there were a couple of jurisdictions, namely New York and Chicago, that saw funding taken back. And some might argue that that was a strategy related to the shutdown, but the actual DBE rule is not shutdown related. So I understand the confusion here because it's like multiple overlapping pieces. On the federal shutdown specifically, we're continuing to monitor potential impacts. I know many of you have gone through shutdown periods before in your time here or in other organizations as well. There's a lot we don't know, so I'm not here to speculate on things I don't know. What I would say is the HRA remains the area that we're probably paying the closest attention to where immediate impact could come. We have payments that last through the month of October and through the first half of the month of November. And so there's a timeline there where it's not, I just don't want you thinking it's tomorrow that we face an immediate issue going on around us. I know the Community Development Committee continues to think about what options might look like in terms of beyond November 15th if there's no changes at that time. We're not ready to make any recommendations. My only other question I had for them is like, what's our monthly spend rate in that area? It's $12 million a month is approximately the monthly spend rate out of our HR area. When it comes to other sources of funding, like transit funds, because they come from different sources of funding, those remain generally flowing at this point. So we'll continue to monitor. It's a day by day, hour by hour at times, changing environment, but just wanted to let you know that we're meeting on this. If you have specific questions, please let me know. We have a team that convenes weekly. We can convene far faster than that if we need to, but otherwise we're evaluating where we're at every Tuesday morning to make sure we're tracking.
Very good, thank you. And then General Counsel.
Nothing from the Office of General Counsel.
There you go. All right, anything else for the good of the order tonight? All right, if not, we can be adjourned.